Thank you for downloading this RealAgriculture podcast. Excite your crops with inputs from Excite Bio. Access nitrogen and phosphorus with Excite Bio's lineup of inoculants and ag biologicals. Since 2010, they've been helping farmers harness the power of the soil. Learn more at excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. On this episode of The Word, man, Nova Scotia weather is different, no question about that. Hey, is it go time in Ontario? What a crazy February. It is not bad to rethink things, and at the end, as many questions as I can get to. Really appreciate the questions. Keep them coming. That's all excellent. Let's go. First off, happy Valentine's Day. And you know, it's always important to recognize the ones in your life that you love. But it shouldn't just be on Valentine's Day. It should just hit your brain, and it should be every day, but you should make it a special day, certainly more than once a year. And so happy Valentine's Day, and you know, kudos to everybody who make it special more often than Valentine's Day, but for sure, make today a special day. Next, yes, I am in Nova Scotia. I'm really lucky, really fortunate to be invited out. I talked to growers on Monday. I talked to certified crop advisors on Tuesday, and I was already supposed to be home in Ontario. But Nova Scotia gets more snow. The last time I was here, pre-COVID, I was supposed to fly home on a Friday. I believe I made it home on Sunday night or early Monday morning, if I recall correctly. Just got storm stayed. Yep, my early morning flight this morning, Wednesday, February 14th, was canceled. Hopefully we get out this afternoon. Just a wicked kind of snowstorm overnight here. But you talk about weather, different weather. Oh my gosh, it was wet here last growing season. They got 40 inches. That's 1,000 millimeters. I actually give the people here in Nova Scotia a bit of credit. Most of them talk millimeters in terms of rainfall as opposed to inches. So they're moving more towards the metric system than maybe you are in Ontario, or at least more than Wheat Pete is. But wow. In Ontario, just to make, if you don't have perspective, we get about 35 to 37 inches of rain, depends on where you're at in Ontario. Less if you're up in the Earlton, New Lisker district. But yeah, that's our annual precipitation. At least a third of that comes in the non-growing season. They were wet here in Nova Scotia. The wheat crop was okay because the real wet weather didn't happen till after most of the wheat crop had finished its grain fill, although harvest was a brute. But corn and soybeans, very, very disappointing. And yep, just different weather here in Nova Scotia. But awesome people, and I will tell you, they drive like you should drive, or they drive far more reasonable. Going down the 102, it's their major 4-lane highway, and everybody is sort of doing fairly respectful things, like people stay in the slow lane when they're going slower, and they drive about the speed limit, and every once in a while, a vehicle just goes flying past you, and their comment would be, oh yeah, there goes one of those crazy Ontario folks who have moved out here to retire, and they just gotta seem to go. On that note, oh my gosh, I took the tractor back to the Elora Research Station, our research tractor, last Thursday. I just don't understand going up a hill, at one point going up a hill, and no way that people could see who was coming over that hill. 8 vehicles in a row past me. The tractor was going 55 kilometers an hour. I know that's not legal on the SMV sign, but that's how fast it was going. And it was like, wait 5 to 10 seconds, you'll be able to pass safely, or pass and put your life at risk. I do not get what people think about from that standpoint. It is just really shake your head. Hey, one very, very sad note before I move on. Craig Connell passed away in Middlesex County, a real driving force in agriculture. Our thoughts go out and just a real loss to Ontario agriculture for sure. I know there's other people across the country that pass away. I don't always get a chance to mention them, but I did hear about Craig, and in the livestock industry in particular, sheep and cattle, he did just some really amazing things. So too bad for that loss, no question about that. The other nasty thing that has happened, of course, dicamba losing its registration in the U.S. I'm not going to say much about that. Who knows where it shakes out? What I will say is that it has zero impact on Canadian farmers, so tremendous impact on soybean farmers and corn farmers in the U.S., zero impact in Canada. The other thing I will say is that is bad for all of agriculture, just full stop, bad for all of agriculture. It may not impact us directly here in Canada, but yeah, it's not the kind of thing that's going to help us move forward here with agricultural production. And one last quick note before I move on, the caller that said, okay, Peter, I don't believe that the caller said 4%. Actually, I think agriculture is like 1.75% of the population. His comment was, I don't think 1.75% of the population can be responsible for 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And I think I said last week that that's what the individual I discussed with said to me, and I didn't know if that was right. So I did a quick Google search, and based on the Ag Canada website, it looks like Canadian agriculture is about 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions. That's still pretty significant if you think that 2% of the population is 10% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and it's because of what we do. And whether it's 10% or 30% isn't really the issue. The issue is let's work at reducing that, because that's the important factor. And to Adam, who said, people are talking about not growing corn because of its carbon footprint. Like, does that make sense? And by the way, why are we taking corn and making ethanol out of it? At the end of the day, to fix the whole greenhouse gas emissions thing, we have to stop burning so many fossil fuels. The fossil fuels have taken us such a long way, but somehow we have to get to be burning less of them, pumping less of them out of the ground. If I can take a corn crop, and what the corn crop does is it captures carbon out of the atmosphere. If I can take that carbon, which already is in the atmosphere, and use that in a vehicle and just cycle that carbon through on an annual basis, I gotta think that's better than taking carbon that, out of the soil that's been there for who knows, 1 million years or 2 million years. I have no idea how long, but regardless, I just have to think that's better. So I'm not opposed to that thought process at all. We're going to use soybeans to make biodiesel or make diesel fuel, and I think that's cycling current carbon. Hopefully that makes more sense than pumping it out of the ground from that perspective. So don't go away from corn. I don't think that makes sense. All right, enough on all that, I don't know, what's that, philosophical stuff. We got to move on. Cool. We finally have the Dawn screening report. Go to gocorn.net. And huge hats off to both Albert Tenuta, the provincial pathologist with the Ministry of Agriculture here in Ontario, and Dr. Dave Hooker, Ridgetown Campus, University of Guelph. They have driven that effort. And when you look at that data, it's 3-year data, you can really see, number one, not all hybrids are in the trial. That's unfortunate, but think about how big that trial would be to put them all in. At least you can go to that trial and you can see hybrids that have been consistently low in Dawn production, and that's what counts. So have a look. If you go to Table 2, what's really interesting in that information to me on Table 2 is that there's 5 different environments in 2023, which was a high pressure year, so we get some really crazy high numbers. And you can look at individual hybrids that on average are good. They're below the Czech hybrid. They could even be quite a bit below the Czech hybrid. But in one of those environments, they may well be 134% or 190% or 214% of the Dawn level of the susceptible Czech hybrid. And it just shows you how variable that whole process is. and how hard it is to predict what a particular individual variety is going to do. And from that standpoint, if you're a hog farmer, look at that 2023 data and try to pick hybrids that didn't ever get that high blip, and they exist in the data set, and certainly stay away from the ones that are above the susceptible check. But really awesome data. Have a look at that, and thanks to Albert and Dave for all the work that they did there. Hey, let's move on. And yes, Dr. Dave also tweeting out a picture. His cover crop oats are still alive. And my good friend Josh sending me a text saying, yeah, my oats are alive as well. How can you tell if the oats are alive? Don't look at green leaves. That doesn't mean very much. Just like winter wheat. You want to know if winter wheat is alive? Dig it up. Look for white root growth, new white root growth. That's what Dave did. It was there. And we talked about that on Tech Talk Tuesdays last night, and it was just a great discussion. So it's been super warm up until this point of our winter. We had the one cold snap in January, but a mild winter. I think Tracy Bowdy said 4 degrees Celsius above normal at this point in time. Wow. And what is the impact of that moving forward? Well, some of the impacts are that the oat crop may well survive. So our cover crop oats, if we didn't spray them last fall, we're going to have to kill them this spring. Some of the winter annual weeds are going to get to be bigger. I believe it was Jason put in the chat last night that he already saw dandelions in flower in his lawn, or at least one dandelion flower. So some things like Canada fleabane and chickweed that really have the ability to grow at cold temperatures, they are probably going to be further advanced once we hit spring than they would be otherwise. And it doesn't really change anything, but it does say, okay, make sure that we use enough glyphosate if we're taking those out, or that we get to them as early as we can and realize that they may be tougher to kill because they're a little bit more mature. And from the disease standpoint, zero impact. From the insect standpoint, yeah, this winter in Ontario conditions at least, we probably have not killed as many insects, at least not from cold temperatures, as we normally would. And so you just say, yep, going to have to pay attention. And if I'm the first guy planting soybeans in Essex County where bean leaf beetle is a real problem, probably having those treated with an insecticide is important. Hey, the other things that's going on out in the countryside, already clover going on. And the kind of question is, well, is it too early or not? In our data, if it's February, now it's a little bit early in February, but we looked at February, we looked at March, we looked at April, and the best was typically March, but February was not statistically different for sure. If it's good conditions, getting that clover on, I don't think is a bad thing, although I'm not in a big rush if the weather turns against us. The other thing, Luke from Orangeville saying, hey, Peter, what about frost seeding oats? And Nick, Nature Nut Nick, my great friend at Strathroy, is saying, Peter, I broadcast rye into my corn stalks. It doesn't look like it caught at all. It just looks like it rotted on the soil surface. So I may go out there and frost seed some cover crop oats into that to try to get some living roots into my soil. Nick's big into soil health and trying to look at that whole process. And in both cases, Luke said, I'm waiting for snow in the snowbanks. Nick said, but it's too early. No, it's not too early. Get out there, frost seed the oats. It's time. Don't wait for the snow in the snowbanks. Plant the rest of the field. When that snow goes in the snowbanks along the edge, then go back and do that when you get that chance. But no, absolutely do that. Jack saying, hey, Peter, I'm going to go out and I'm going to patch in some hard red spring wheat into the holes in my winter wheat crop. I have some holes that got flooded out. And his question was, I'm doing it now. Do I need to put some liquid phosphorus starter with the seed? Well, liquid or dry, I don't care. At the end of the day, wheat loves phosphorus in the early going. And yes, you may have put phosphorus with the wheat seed when you planted it last fall. You probably did. The challenge is when you plant this hard red spring wheat into the winter wheat, which, by the way, if it's not hard red winter wheat, it will make your wheat crop feed wheat, likely if you combine them all together. So there are some concerns to mention there. But if you don't get that new seed right on top of the old seed, and you probably don't, and you probably shouldn't, you should actually go on a little bit of an angle so any of the surviving winter wheat, you don't take it out by driving right down the row. Well, now my new hard red spring wheat can be up to 3.5 inches away from the fertilizer band that I put on last fall. I just think it's a good process. Get that fertilizer on, that's for sure. The other thing that's going on out there is there's people moldboard plowing. There are people disc ripping in February. As my good friend Ryan says, boy, I sure hope we get some winter from here, because it might be dry enough to get out there and, get through the field, but it is mud underneath, and you're turning up that soil, particularly if it's heavy clay soil. If we don't get some freeze-thaw cycles, yeah, that could look a little nasty. Moving on. From Earlton, Jason saying, hey, Peter, old hay, do I rip it? Do I plow it? Up here, do I even need tillage? Like, so many people up here say that I need tillage. Well, first off, Jason, if it's old hay, I hate disc rippers. They're not going to bury the sod. It's going to be a mess. As much as the plow might be a 4-letter word, the moldboard plow, if you're going to do tillage, is absolutely preferred there over a disc ripper. And as far as, is tillage needed in your area? Well, if everybody says it is, there's probably a reason. They probably tried no-till, or at least they may not have. That's the real question. But I would say you have to try it and go slow and learn your way, because otherwise it can cost you in a big way. Hey, a great tweet from Woody. Mark Hasmick out of Michigan tweeting out that without wheat and cover crop in the rotation, corn is the real poverty grass. So Adam Pfeffer, you're always pushing poverty grass is wheat. Think about that. Mark Hasmick, if you don't have wheat and cover crop in the rotation, corn is the real poverty grass. And in his data, corn following soybeans was 20 bushels per acre higher yielding than corn following corn. Corn following wheat was 33 bushels higher yielding. And when he included a cover crop after the wheat crop, he gained another 11 bushels. So wheat with a cover crop gained him 44 bushels per acre. He actually gave a shout out to Wheat Pete, saying that Wheat Pete push rotation talked about this longer term benefit. And so he tried it, and guess what? It's 44 bushels for him, which is much greater than our research data would say. But wow, that's very cool stuff. On that note, out here in Nova Scotia, I had a great talk with Niels. I've had this talk with Mike out of Ontario and Woody as well. And when I gave my presentation, or I tweet something out, and a lot of these people are saying, wow, Peter, you really make me question what I'm doing. I thought I was doing a pretty good job, but as I go through the thought process with what you've said, I'm not sure I'm doing a good job at all. And that's awesome, because by the way, all three of you, Niels, Woody, and Mike, you are awesome farmers, just doing a tremendous job. But if Wheat Pete can present information and make you go through the thought process and say, is there any way I can tweak a really good system and make it a great system or a better system, that is what Wheat Pete is all about, man. I truly believe that the most dangerous words in agriculture are, we've always done it this way. And so, yes, you're doing a super job. Let's see if we can make it better. And if you go through the thought process and say, Pete, despite what you've said, I don't see any improvements, fair enough. At least we thought about it, and we didn't just sit back and not worry about it. And on the same note, Jason, you asked me about rotation and what is the best rotation. Well, I think from this whole thought process, it really, as much as you can, you do go grass crop, corn, wheat, barley, whatever, to a legume crop, so edible beans or soybeans or canola. Canola's not a legume, but it's a broadleaf crop at least. And so if you can alternate between those, that's a good thing. But don't try to lock yourself into a specific rotation 6 years out. What you really have to think about is you have to make money, you have to be sustainable, that means being profitable, and then you say, let's keep the crops in my rotation that are the best for soil health as much as I can. So that's wheat, that's barley, that's oats, that's sunflower. Even corn is okay. Soybeans and edible beans, very, very hard on the soil. Canola, really not that great on the soil from many different perspectives, although much better than the soybean crops. And you just look at that rotation and try to say, okay, let's try to get grass, broadleaf if we can, or at least if we go corn and we have to follow it with another grass, we're looking at wheat, we're looking at barley, or vice versa, put the corn after the wheat. That's probably a better rotation. And just think it through that way. There is no perfect rotation. Hey, I'm getting way over time, but a couple of other quick notes. Norman asked me, and I don't have this answer, so I am looking to the people listening to this podcast. He says, bedding, cardboard, sawdust, or straw. What makes the most sense? We know that if we use sawdust, we have to use more nitrogen to grow the crop. But with sawdust, I can bed once a week. With straw, I have to bed every other day. Is there any studies? I am not aware of any studies. I didn't take the time to do a Google search. Somebody out there knows this, so let me know what that is. And Spencer, you asked about removing soybean stubble and growing winter wheat. Is there a yield impact? If you do a super job of chopping the straw and spreading it uniformly, there won't be much yield benefit to baling the soybean straw. But if you do a poor job, and many poor jobs out there, then yes, the soybean straw has a yield impact. You asked me what's the value if you sell it. Well, first off, if you sell it, make sure you're still spreading the pods, because people who windrow soybean stubble and then bale it, there's just this 3-foot wide strip of soybean pods going up the field, and that's still going to screw up your yield in those areas. But from a nutrient standpoint, it's pretty similar to wheat straw, and so maybe a little bit less nutrients than wheat straw. If wheat straw has 2 cents a pound of N, P, and K and sulfur, which is probably, it's less than that because fertilizer prices have come down. It's more likely 1.5 cents or 1.25 cents per pound. That's the nutrient value, and then you go beyond that to figure out what it's worth. Oh my gosh, I am way over time, over 20 minutes. I can't do this. I just cannot do this, but it is wintertime. Hopefully you don't mind. That's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, February the 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, and keep the questions coming. I promise I won't go on so long next week. Talk to you then.